So in one of Cenk's most recent tweets, he reminds us that you shouldn't just tweet out everything that you're thinking about because you might sound like an insensitive asshole. We're going to talk about it. Thanks for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. And of course, as always, I am your humble host, Niko House. So, Cenk tweeted in response to Donald Trump something that was so egregious that even Emma Vigilant had to step in and be like, skirt, what the hell did you just say? That don't vibe correctly, bro. Stop and think before you actually assert these things. And of course, because it's Cenk, you know it's him providing some type of special exception to Democrats, making this claim once again that Democrats are somehow more magnanimous than Republicans are, that they're more effective legislators, that they're better leaders than Republicans are, which if you know anything about politics at this point, you would know that both the Democrats and Republicans are both full of it. They are. They really are. Now, Cenk's tweet says this: if we had a Democrat with balls when we take over, because that's looking likely, right? They'd cut off funding to red states and make them beg for their handout. Almost all of them are welfare queens who live off of blue states. Republican-ran states are on average miserable failures who take more from the federal government. That's interesting. That's interesting. Because even with nonsensical tweets like that, there is some truth to it. There is. So are Republican-run states generally welfare, quote-unquote, welfare queens? Actually, that's true. It is. Republican-ran states, on average, do have like a higher population of users for food stamps. They have a higher population for users. You can go ahead and switch it. They have a higher population for users for, Social Security or like disability and Medicaid users. And, Medicaid is generally what you use if you're poor, if you're not a child. So that's true, technically speaking, but they're actually not that different from the welfare users and welfare queens of blue states. And I'll explain that in a second. But even though that is true, it is not necessarily a function of the state being ran by Republicans that has caused them to be welfare states. It's actually more to do with the location. It is. Let me give you an example. So let's look at New Hampshire and Vermont. These states are pretty unique. They're in the New England area. They're like their size, their literal size is like almost the exact same size, and it's super weird coincidence. However, one of those states is a coastal state. Another state is obviously inland. They're both ran by Republicans right now, though. So let's check this out. Vermont is ran by a Republican as well. New Hampshire's ran by a Republican, and it has a Republican legislature. So is Vermont. New Hampshire's GDP is 69 billion, but Vermont's GDP is 27 billion. Now, they have similar location, similar weather. They're both ran by Republicans, and yet New Hampshire, for some reason, is experiencing a higher influx of people coming into the state and living there. They have a higher GDP. They have about 2.5 times the population of Vermont. Now, here's what's interesting. If you look at the GDP of New Hampshire compared to Vermont, it is almost exactly 2.5 times higher, which means effectively, if you just double the population in Vermont, you may see a similar effect. Now, given that the weather is the same, the location's very, very similar, and it's both ran by Republicans, why is New Hampshire doing so much better than Vermont as far as their GDP is concerned and their economy is concerned? Well, If you notice, New Hampshire is doing better because it follows the same pattern as every other state. If you are a coastal state, you generally do better than the states that are quote unquote inland. Vermont is to the left or to the west of New Hampshire. New Hampshire it's very popular for beaches. Obviously, the election helps, right? How popular the primaries are because they're the first primary in the nation. So that brings tourism as well. But effectively, the tourism is driven by the implications of New Hampshire being a coastal state. Look at Florida, people. Florida, we do so well because of our tourism. And remember, we've had, this governor is a Republican. Rick Scott was a Republican who was absolutely horrid. And guess what? Despite how bad Rick Scott was and how bad the Republican government has ran the state for the most part, we still make so much money through our tourist industry that we cannot have state taxes. And we have toll roads, right? But it's like 25 cents here, 75 cents there. If you go use a turnpike all the way from like the south of Miami or Key West and drive all the way to the top of Florida using the turnpike, you might pay a total of $20. Have you ever driven from North Carolina to New York? You're going to spend like $60 to $70 on tolls. New York is obviously a blue state. So why is it that Florida, being ran by Republicans, is doing so well? Well, because we have nice weather, we're a coastal state, and we have a good tourist industry because of the two former points that I just made. Now, I want you to look at California, right? Because, Cenk lives in California. 2, California has the 5th largest GDP in the world. And 3, of course, Cenk is also insinuating that because California is ran mostly by Democrats, that it is a better ran state. Let's check out if the numbers bear out there, okay? California is the 5th largest GDP, not in the country, but in the damn world. In the entire world. Which means that California, if it was being ran correctly, would effectively be able to eliminate all of the negative impacts that comes through harsh economic times like what we're experiencing, to make sure that public education is ran correctly, right? Make sure people have health care, things like that. Mitigate bankruptcies, aid people with affordable housing and making sure they don't default on their loans because you have so much money in excess, right? Real quick, California has the highest population of gainfully employed homeless people. Did y'all know that? In the entire country. This is a blue state, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm confused. According to Cenk, that can't possibly be the case. And yet, and still here we are. Not just homeless people, gainfully employed. In other words, they have a part-time or a full-time job. This is a fact. Okay? Blue state. All right. So, their public education system in California, blue state, 5th largest GDP in the entire world, is ranked 38th in the entire country. That means they are only better than 12 other states, which means they're worse than a lot of red dominated states, correct? Because if you look at the electoral map, most of the states are actually red. And yet you have, what happened, Cenk? 5th largest economy in the world. Blue state, ran by Democrats. Why are the 38th ranked public education? That's funded by state money and federal money. So and what makes it even worse, if you think about it from this perspective, public education is primarily funded by property taxes. California has some of the highest property taxes in the country. They also have some of the most expensive property in the country. They also have some of the wealthiest industries in the country. And yet people are overpaying for apartments, overpaying for houses, overpaying for property. And their return, 93% of public education is paid for by property taxes. So they're not even getting a good return on their public education system despite paying all that extra money. Blue state. What is being done about California's public education system? From my vantage point, it seems like they've been just privatizing it more than anything. But I thought that was a Republican thing. What happened? Interesting. Now, let's look at, and also, let's not forget, California is also a beneficiary of corporate welfare, almost more than any other state outside of maybe New York. Why? Because they have industries like the tech industry there that have been known to have been given subsidies by the federal government and the state governments. Come on. Corporate welfare is not welfare now? Corporate welfare is literally given by the federal government for people to make their home in your state, sometimes given by the state government. And they provide jobs to your state. Correct? So you benefit from corporate welfare. Is that not still welfare? Okay, that's what I thought. So anyway, let's look at New York. In New York, 1 in every 125 people are homeless. Did you know that? 1 in every 125 people. And if you've ever walked around New York, you know it would seem that it is more than that. Honestly, you can't go a block without seeing a homeless person. New York is ranked 23 for public school systems, barely cracking the top 50% in the country. Blue ran state. That means, once again, a bunch of red states have a better ranked public education system than a popular blue state with an extremely high GDP and plenty of money to spend. Interesting. It is also the home, of course, of Wall Street, which is, wasn't that just given trillions? Wasn't Wall Street just given trillions by the Republican government that is currently in charge at the federal level? And they were given hundreds of billions by a Democratic dominated government. And then on top of that, the state of New York won't even regulate the New York, the Wall Street banks and the stock exchange to any significant degree to make sure that they're spending that money in a way that is not wasteful to the tax dollars of those who provided that funding, which is us. Did we not just see corporate welfare to the tune of trillions go up in smoke in hours, ladies and gentlemen? A blue state with barely any regulation. If it's such a well-run state, then why is the entire country suffering? We're being told we don't have enough money to fund everybody else to make sure there's money in the pockets of people in states that are blue and red because of it's regulated, quote unquote. But let's be real. It's not regulated to the degree that it should be. Wall Street isn't. These banks are not. Dodd-Frank made banks even bigger. So what the hell? Basically, Wall Street takes advantage. They use their lobbyists and take advantage of everything that New York allows them to take advantage of. And that is a blue ran state. Question, wasn't it just the Democrats in New York that tried to end the presidential primary? Luckily, it was overturned by Judge Torres. But they just tried to infringe on democracy. Blue ran state. tried to affect the outcome of how the Democrats would do business at their convention by disallowing delegates to go to any candidate that was not named Joe Biden. That's what they were trying to do in that blue ran state that you cherish so much. Glory, thank you very much for the super chat. Hope you're doing well, homie. If California was its own country, we probably would have sanctioned them for their homelessness and their elections, right? We probably would have established a coup. And not to mention, wasn't it California that had Anthony Rendon block Medicare for all, where most of the Democrats of the state were silent on it, did not challenge him on it, have not reintroduced it since, did not try to unseat him, did not punish him for unilaterally deciding that Medicare for all was not necessary based off of, it was, I mean, the reason why, I can't remember. It was some nonsense. He was poking holes. Oh, well, you didn't map out exactly where the money would be coming from, even though they did map it out. But it was like not detailed and meticulous enough. That's a blue state. That was a blue assemblyman in California. Killed Medicare for all. Okay, that's what I thought. So let's look at Michigan. Michigan is a blue collar state that has been mostly ran by Democrats. Now, if you all recall, there was a very, very popular Democrat of a darker hue. One of the most popular presidents of history, surprisingly enough, given how neoliberal he was. Remember that guy? He goes to this little town, pours up some water, and says, "This water is perfectly drinkable." See? Tastes like, it looks like Coke, tastes like Sprite. It's good. Yeah. The Democrats running the state of Michigan allowed numerous people to be poisoned with lead. A Democrat who was running the country went to go essentially co-sign the effort. Hey, he is literally looking at the water be brown. Pretends to drink, come on. And he was basically covering for a governor who was blue. By the way, that same governor who was blue, you blue no matter who, people, that same governor who was blue used the taxes from the people of the state of Michigan to sue the people of the state of Michigan because they wouldn't pay their water bill for lead-infested water. Really, bro? Really? So that was not only a blue state ran by a blue governor, but his BS was co-signed by a blue president in the blue city of Flint, which was also ran by Democrats, by the way. I don't know if it still is, but it was at that point. I'm starting to see a lot of flaws in Cenk's logic. I'm starting to wonder if he actually thought this through all the way. Now, let's look at it from this perspective. Let's look at the red states that are just, going through it right now, right? Question: how many of those red states were perfectly fine before the neoliberal trade deals that looked like NAFTA? How many red states in the Rust Belt? How many red states in the Midwest? How many red areas within those red states, red towns, where these textile mills used to be, where these car manufacturing companies and warehouses used to be? The disastrous trade deals that, to my understanding, were introduced largely by Democrats. Now, granted, the Republicans haven't done much. They've either bolstered the disastrous trade deals or haven't done anything about them because that's probably what they were going to do anyway, but they didn't have the silver tongue to get it done. But nevertheless, Bill Clinton and NAFTA and then what Barack Obama tried to do with TPP, which would have basically been NAFTA on steroids, How many red states are now getting killed by policies set forth by Democrats who didn't care what happened to those innocent people, those hardworking people in those red states? Regardless of who, there's nothing when your entire industry think about it like this. Imagine if you ripped out Disney World from Florida. If you ripped out Disney World, ripped out Universal Studios, ripped out SeaWorld, and maybe you still have Miami, but basically everything that makes Florida a worldwide tourist attraction, there would be no such thing as no taxes. We would be paying high taxes probably. And we would have a lot of issues. We have a lot of problems economically. Our tourist industry, because of our location, allows us to bypass a lot of the negative impact of some of the neoliberal and neoconservative policies we see at the federal level or even at the state level sometimes. Places like Indiana are not so lucky. Places like Kansas are not so lucky. A lot of locations in North Carolina were not so lucky. South Carolina was not so lucky. A lot of places in West Virginia were not so lucky. How well these states are being quote unquote ran, or how it looks to the outside, is not necessarily a function of whether or not it's being ran at the time by a Democrat or a Republican. It is usually a function, as of late, not necessarily, it didn't maybe used to be this way, but it definitely is now. It is usually the way a state is performing is representative of two things nowadays. Where their location is. So in other words, Portland is a very popular state. California is a very popular state. Texas, which is a red state, by the way, purplish, but still largely considered red. Gulf of Mexico. It's a coastal state. Even North Carolina was at one point the sixth rising economy in the country, and that's because of its location. That location is why there's Fort Bragg is there, Pope Air Force Base is there. There's a lot of Air Force bases and a lot of Army bases there because of the location. It's a convenient location to launch from. Even South Carolina is kept afloat, even though it's a very poor state. It's kept afloat almost entirely by Myrtle Beach. North Carolina has the entire Outer Banks to benefit from. And it's a red state. South Carolina, red state. Virginia, red state, benefits from D.C. and from being a coastal state. It's Virginia Beach. Like, the historic implications of being a coastal state are why you see coastal states remain successful today. It's nothing to do with whether or not it's ran by a red governor or a blue governor. It just does it. Not anymore. Now, the other factor that plays a part, a massive part, is the federal government now, because they've exercised so much overarching overreach with these disastrous trade deals. So much overreach with corporate welfare, while simultaneously telling the people like you and me that we're not entitled to any type of assistance, even when they pass policies or the government pass policies where we're forced to stay home from our jobs. We're forced to, right? A lot of people can't go to work if they wanted to. Some people are taking a cut in their hours. Obviously, that means you can't pay your rent. You can't pay your bills. So the government forced you to do something, but they won't compensate you for them forcing you to literally change your entire livelihood because of their mess ups. Because they didn't implement Medicare for all, single payer healthcare in time. Because they haven't implemented a UBI in time. Because they did not take the necessary steps to address a pandemic like this when it does actually occur. So now they're reacting by demanding us to follow certain rules without actually providing any safety net for us having to follow these rules. So the federal government has such overarching and overreaching authority over the well-being and the welfare of almost the entire country that if certain states like New York and California, at least as far as their GDP is concerned, look like they're successful, it's because of industries like Wall Street, like the banking industry, like the tech industry, like Hollywood, like the tourist industries that are saving these states, at least on their face, in spite of the federal government passing these disastrous neoliberal, neoconservative policies. But at the core of the argument, though, for Cenk, bro, what? We should just cut off funding? Do you understand that cutting off federal funding to these states means like the few people who get Medicaid and Medicare, or especially Medicaid, would be gone? They would go, like, while we are waiting for Republicans to beg for something we know they're not going to beg for from a Democrat who's acting like a cocky asshole just to prove a point, people are going to die. People are going to starve. That's a fact. Look at how many people got kicked off of insurance and all this stuff just over a few months of debate over Obamacare under Trump. Millions of people were kicked off just over a few months of debate. A few minor changes. Imagine cutting off funding to most of the states in the country until they start kissing the Democrats' ass. That's where we're at now? That's what we're arguing for now? Bro, come on. Come on, Cenk. Nah, that's not right. That's not right. You should apologize for that tweet. It is extremely insensitive. It doesn't even deal in facts. Like, the tweet isn't even based in facts. It's not based in reality. It's based in your hyper partisan mindset that where you've somehow managed to convince yourself, probably because it's for your personal benefit, that the Democrats are somehow much better. They're more altruistic. They're more magnanimous. They're acting in good faith. As compared to the GOP, and that's just simply not true. Trust me when I say lobbyists don't discriminate. Lobbyists love paying off Democrats, and they love paying off the GOP. The military-industrial complex loves paying off Democrats, and they love paying off the GOP. If the GOP, for the most part, can get away with it, they will absolutely behave corruptly. And if the Democrats get away with it, they will absolutely behave corruptly. And certain industries provide cover for them in respective states, whereas in other states, they don't have the cover because the federal government has ripped that industry from underneath them, regardless of the implication that it may have, the negative implication that it may have on the people who reside in those states. Those are the facts. Okay, so I would love to know what you think about this. Like this video, share this video, leave a comment below, make sure to subscribe, but always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. If you like that segment of Mikasa Sukasa, don't forget to like the video and smash that subscribe button. Want access to members only live streams, behind the scenes footage, and other premium content? Well, you can endorse us on Rockfin Premium, become a patron through Patreon, or you can sign up for the MCSC Premium membership through YouTube. All the links are in the description below. But hey, more than anything,